Here is John Ciampi. John is going to be presenting to us a talk entitled Hogwarts Hidden Drug Scene, the War on Drugs, Sexual Violence, and Subverting Biopower. Can everyone please join me in welcoming John?
Thanks so much for that. So, yeah, as the title would suggest, why don't we look at drugs in Harry Potter? I don't know. So I wanted to say a few things about the scope of the presentation before I get into it. I'm going to be looking at three specific moments that I think give us themes and messages about drug use throughout the series. My approach to this is kind of following the way people have analyzed other social topics in Harry Potter, which is that it's often dealt with via metaphor. Things like race and sexuality, I think we see dealt with metaphorically in Harry Potter, not directly. So that's how I'm going to approach drugs here, not actual Muggle human world drugs. And also, kind of going along with that, I'm not going to be considering the role of alcohol. As, again, that wouldn't be a metaphor, that would be the direct one. And also, one of our hosts here, Lauren Camachi, has, in my view, already written the definitive article on alcohol in Harry Potter. So if you're interested in that, you can read her essay, Frisky, Risky, Fire Whiskey, The Rhetorical Function of Alcohol. Another thing I want to say is kind of set the stage, is that I'm considering the context of messages about drugs that were being given to US teens in the 90s and early 2000s as when the books were coming out. I don't really know what British schools were telling people. I've confined myself to the American context. And in that way, two of the main kind of programs of informing teenagers about drugs that I'm going to look at are the approach of Just Say No and the DARE program, which definitely brings up some strange memories for me. So I'm going to kind of look at how that, that's the context where we start thinking about drugs and messages to teenagers. One more thing. I think that the message here, I'm trying to avoid oversimplifying the message. There's a great article called Splinch, The Problem of Disability in the Harry Potter series, where they use the magical slang of splinched, which is when someone apparates incorrectly and they kind of get cut off, to talk about the way that these messages are presented in Harry Potter, where it's not so absolutist as like, it's a good political message, it's a bad political message. It's like, well, let's be more nuanced than that. And I think that's a really great lesson for all sort of cultural analysis that I've tried to take on. I was interested when I was doing my research here to see that I actually found more articles talking about Harry Potter fans being addicted to the books than I did articles analyzing themes about addiction in the books. And I was like, oh, I found this great article. I was like, no, actually, no, it's not about that at all. Another thing, I just wanted to give a shout out to where I went to college, St. John's University in 2016. I attended a Harry Potter seminar that helped me to develop these ideas, taught by Dr. Dora Ahmad. And the last thing, just a little content warning. I think when you're talking about drugs and teenagers, for me, sexual violence had to be something that was mentioned, so I just wanted to, throw that out there in the front. One more piece of context. I am not currently on any drugs, though some people did suggest to me that I should be. Young adult literature. Why look at drugs? Why Harry Potter? So I think that young adult literature is an important place to deal with serious topics. People will say, oh, well, that's for kids. It's a kid's thing. It's like, well, no, it's a young adult thing, And the teenager as a category is sort of a modern invention. So I think it's still taking some time culturally for us to understand that distinction, where like a book for a 10-year-old just is not going to be the same or deal with the same themes as a book for a 16-year-old. So that's one thing that I would say there. Dealing with issues associated with teenagers' loss of childish innocence is part of the work here. Also, it's a hugely popular genre. One of the few genres that I think there's increasing numbers of readers. Like when you look at novels, and I think about this studying novels, it's like, are people reading these things? Well, they're reading these things. So I think that's another reason it's important to look at this. Okay, so a bit of history here, and I'm trying to keep a brisk pace. A a kind of historical context for thinking about this in America has to go back to the war on drugs. If you look this up, the phrasing and the approach here originated with Richard Nixon, but it's really under Ronald Reagan that things are escalated and that the focus really becomes on punishment over treatment. Under the Reagan administration, the roles of the FBI, the CIA, and the military were expanded to increase their powers to enforce drug laws. Just a quote here, the FBI anti-drug monies increased from $8 million in 1980 to $95 million under Reagan, so a huge amount of money being directed towards these things is increasing the scope of what they were able to do. In 1984, under Reagan, the Comprehensive Crime Bill was passed. This heavily increased penalties for marijuana. It also kind of invented what we know now as civil forfeiture law, where the money that drug dealers have or people involved in drug crimes can basically just be claimed by the local police departments. So that, again, hugely increases the funding going to this. And I think it's, obviously you can't talk about the war on drugs without acknowledging how it contributed to systematic racism and how it was inequitably enforced against people of color. So as part of Reagan's war on drugs, Nancy Reagan, one of her big sort of projects was the Just Say No campaign. This was the sort of marketing arm of the war on drugs, the consumer-focused portion of it. Nancy Reagan actually worked with a marketing firm to come up with this as the slogan. And famously, there's a press conference where a little girl asks Nancy Reagan, "What should I do if someone offers me drugs?" And she says, "Just say no." Like as the quote that I have here from an MSNBC article notes, this is, from a modern perspective, one of the most unsophisticated anti-drug messages of all time. I think that's obvious to us, but clearly it denies the social and environmental factors at play in drug use. It's an incredibly individualistic approach, and I've spent some time doing research in public health, and individual level interventions are not how you solve public health problems. So the individual making better decisions, that's in America how we like to say these things should be solved. That doesn't actually work. Similarly, I don't know if you're supposed to call it DARE or if you're supposed to say the letters. It's just DARE? Okay, sorry. The DARE program, where uniformed police officers would come into schools and do things like hide drugs in the classroom and have dogs find them and tell you how bad drugs are and stuff. There was an article in the American Journal of Public Health, I think in 2009, where they did a study and concluded that these programs do not work. They just do not work. So funding for them has gone down since, so maybe modern teenagers are not getting this exact kind of messaging, but at that time we were. Okay, so on to Potter. The first example of something dealing with addiction that I want to look at is not actually a mood-altering substance, though the other ones are. It has to do with the mirror of Erised. So as I'm sure many of you know, the mirror shows the greatest and deepest desire of whoever looks into it. Harry sees his family all together happy. So I just wanted to read this quote here from Sorcerer's Stone. This is when, after Harry has been to the mirror 2 times, Ron kind of starts to notice something changing with Harry. So the quote's here. This from Ron. "Want to play chess, Harry?" "No." "Why don't we go down and visit Hagrid?" "No, you go." "I know what you're thinking about, Harry. That mirror. Don't go back tonight." "Why not?" "I'm serious, Harry. Don't go." But Harry only had one thought in his head, which was to get back in front of that mirror, and Ron wasn't going to stop him. So I think we can see how compulsive Harry's behavior is here and how he is like sort of addicted to it. He loses interest in his other pursuits, things that used to be fun, like chess. He loses interest in his friends, like Ron and Hagrid. And also, I don't have it on the slide, but he pretty much drops the inquiry into Nicholas Flamel. When they were sort of on the cusp of making a discovery, he just does not care anymore because of this sort of addiction. Eventually, Dumbledore stages an intervention the next time that he goes. The next time Harry goes there, Dumbledore's waiting for him. He tells him that, in Dumbledore's words, men have wasted away looking into the mirror. It's about wasting potential, escaping from reality, and then basically Dumbledore tells him that he needs to resist this temptation and how dangerous it is. The message here, just say no. He just tells Harry, "Hey Harry, like come on, like figure it out, like what are you doing?" So the first message, just say no. To me, not the political message you want to be giving here. Next, the love potion. So this one is a mood-altering substance. I think we need to look here specifically at the incident with Ron and Ramal Devane. So, to refresh your memory, Ramal Devane attempts to give Harry chocolate cauldrons that are spiked with love potion. I think it's important that it's like being hidden in another substance, you know? Or, right, the love potion's being hidden in something else to dose, supposed to be Harry. It ends up being Ron. What happens after this, it says in the text, Ron had not been himself. It talks about the changes in appearance. Obviously, he's like, Harry, can you introduce me to Romalda? Do you know Romalda? And the only thing that the text that Harry can really say about it is Ron might have done something serious. The question to me here, what would have happened if Ramal Devane had been there? So I think you can't think about the love potion without thinking about issues of consent. It's, to me, clearly related to sexual violence and the way that drugs are used to facilitate sexual violence. I read one article, it was called, if I can find the title of it, it was called Powerful Infatuations, The Love Potion and Harry Potter's Ethics of Consent. In that article, they said that the text shifts readerly attention away from the problematic aspects of the love potion, and this article is critical of Rowling and the text for doing so. The reason they say that is, with Ron and Ramal Devane, right after that happens, Ron ends up getting poisoned by the mead, so like they totally just move on, you know, it's not really dealt with. Also in that essay, I have other examples of when love potions come up that maybe if you're interested during the question portion, we can get into some of those. But Merope Gaunt and Tom Riddle, Merope Gaunt used the love potion on Tom Riddle Sr. Voldemort, like, maybe was conceived under a love potion. So also this essay looked at that, saying that, and showed how, again, it's not really dealt with. Harry moves on to blaming Merope Gaunt for, you know, basically not pulling herself up by her bootstraps, and, you know, she was homeless and died related to childbirth. Another thing in Half-Blood Prince, Harry pretends to dose Ron with the Felix Felicis. He pretends to pour it into his cup. Hermione calls him out and tells Ron, she goes, Ron, don't drink that. And she's completely horrified by this, which I think makes sense because Hermione, you know, is the most kind of historically conscious of them, and I think kind of recognizes the implications there of dosing a drink among teenagers, especially even though they're not in college. The dormitory, I think, is another setting that asks us to think about these things. In my original version of this presentation, I was going to criticize Rowling and the text for only theorizing the love potion with men as the victims, Tom Riddle and Ron, and that made sense to me, but then I thought more about the genre and the kind of genre uses of love potions. And I think if you look into it, in the sort of fairy tale or fantasy genres, when love potions show up, they're almost always used by women on men. You know, so I don't think it's fair to criticize Harry Potter for that. I think that's a genre thing. In that case, I started trying to think about it a little differently. If that's been the case in the genre, are love potions more so meant to be a metaphor for seduction or a sort of femme fatale kind of thing, which I think is also, you know, a sexist trope? Is that how they're supposed to be thought about? But then I was considering that they're often shown to be a foolish decision, you know? I think for Ramal Devane, and I think it's significant too that Ramal Devane is younger. I forget what year she is in Half-Blood Prince, but she's significantly younger than Harry and Ron, so I think the love potion gets presented as like a foolish or naive decision rather than a malevolent decision. I have a little article here. This is not a narrative. This is not a folklore or something. This actually comes from the British Medical Journal in 1873, where they say here, a young widow residing in a village, blah, 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 resorted to an old witch and obtained from her a pill, which she took to have the means to introduce into the food of a young man who she had her eye on. Basically, it's a doctor writing a story about a young woman trying to use a love potion on a man, ends up like poisoning him. At the end here, they say, when they went to court, it was determined that the young woman had no other intention than to gain the man's love, and she was merely sentenced to simple imprisonment for a short period. So again, there's not malevolent intentions usually with women using the love potion, so I think this complicates it. I'm wondering, with the way that it's coded as foolish or naive, is the message really more something like, You know, as a mother once said to her daughter, you can't hurry love. You just have to wait. You know. Is that kind of the message? And then my last question here, I don't have an answer for this one. That's the nice thing about presentations is that you can have things where you don't have the answer yet. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. What does it mean for the genre to disavow the reality that most sexual violence is perpetrated by men against women? I'm not sure. We can talk about it maybe. Anyway, to sum up on the love potion, at the very least we can say that Rowling complicates the original message. If the original message was just say no, this is a situation where you can't just say no, right? The individual cannot decide not to do it. They were, dosed with it, right? So just say no, not the message at this part. Lastly, Felix Felicis, the good luck potion. Just to give us a little bit of the plot background. So Felix Felicis comes in. This is when the plot importance here. Harry's trying to obtain the memory from Slughorn that is crucial to defeating Voldemort, right? The memory about the Horcruxes. They're trying to confirm that Voldemort's used Horcruxes. Harry takes the Felix Felicis, and it basically assists him in getting this done. So when we consider Felix Felicis, here's a quote describing the effects of it. It says, after Harry takes it, he feels an exhilarating sense of infinite opportunity stole through him. He felt as though he could have done anything at all. I don't think it's controversial to say that Felix Felicis is mood-altering. Harry is, I would say a little jittery when he's on it. He also says that he feels excellent, really excellent. I think it's also significant, again, that when trying to get the memory from Slughorn and Hagrid get very drunk, and I think Hagrid eventually passes out. Slughorn maybe blacks out. Harry doesn't have trouble staying awake because he's on the Felix Felicis, He doesn't drink the alcohol, right? They give Harry alcohol, he doesn't drink it, he's on the Felix Felicis. He's feeling really excellent. So it's extremely enjoyable. It's necessary for Harry to achieve his destiny. It helps him pursue his own personal goal of defeating Voldemort. That's his desire. It's not Dumbledore or someone else forcing him to do that. That's what he wants to do, is defeat Voldemort, and this helps him do that. And I'll also note, it doesn't even result in a hangover. So even better than maybe some of its real-world counterparts. I was supposed to say this before. Another quote that to me signifies this as a mood-altering substance. Ron has language that's similar to getting high. He says, Harry, that's it, get lucky. So you're not getting high, you're getting lucky, but the message here, we have recreational, consensual drug use being shown as enjoyable, potentially leading to self-discovery. And so if it was just say no before, I think here it's consider saying yes, under the right conditions, right? Under your own consent and your own choice to do so, and in an environment that you might feel comfortable doing so. I think that this effectively disrupts the dominant medical and psychological discourses on drugs, especially at that time where drugs I think were being associated with disease and degeneration. And this shows, well, no, maybe you can do it. Like, we all like Harry. Harry's good. He's not degenerate or diseased, So it's definitely a more positive thing. I do think this is changing somewhat now as things like ketamine or marijuana or psychedelics are now being acknowledged for kind of medical purposes. So maybe this is changing. But definitely at that time period, I think the dominant discourses on these things were kind of politically bad. And I think the book does a good job of countering that. One last thing. If that's the message that we're getting here, what's the political significance? I don't know if any of you were English majors or are English majors. There's one thing, when you get an English degree, you have to agree that in every essay you will cite Michel Foucault. Michel Foucault, he has a concept of biopower. Essentially, what he means by biopower is that systems of power want citizens to be as efficient and productive as possible. This is better for capitalism. So that's his idea. I have a quote here from Nancy Reagan from the same article. She says, "Picture yourself in a battle. In fact, it's one of the most important battles our nation has ever fought." I find this quote very instructive because it's picture yourself in a battle, but our nation is fighting the battle. It shows how it conflates the health of the individual with the fate of the whole nation. By just saying no, you help to increase GDP. You help to further national interests. So with Felix Felicis, I see it subverting these ideas, going against them, which to me is a good political message. And the last quote I have here is just about companies drug testing employees, because big companies know that, or believe that employees on drugs will not be as productive. So it's about controlling and optimizing the bodies of individuals for ultimate productivity. So, conclusions. The Half-Blood Prince, those examples show just say no to be impractical and then ultimately false. I don't think that means that we can forget the initial message in Sorcerer's Stone. That's why I want to turn to the idea of it being a splinched text. There's not one clear message here, it's all of this, right? It's the limits and potentials of how the series depicts drug use. But taking all of that into account, I think we have to say that the series provides a thoughtful and sometimes radical roadmap for navigating the difficult terrain of coming of age in a modern world where drugs are ubiquitous. And that's what I have.